This is Mark Frisch of Marquee Crew, and I just solved a post on Alteryx community and wanted to give you a quick look and to see how I did that. It involves sorting an IP address, and I solved it with a macro. And I'll take you into the macro and show you a regular expression and a couple of other tricks that are part of this solution. If you want to be able to follow along, if you look up how to sort IP addresses on the community, you should be able to see what the source was, and on that also you'll be able to grab the macro that was created. After I created it, I did post to the gallery a IP address validation macro, so people in the gallery will be able to find this as well. I'm going to start out by showing you some test input, and the data looks like IP addresses or not, and I just put a couple of extra fields onto a record and come to this IP macro, and in the configuration you would choose the field that is the IP address, and in my case it happens to be labeled IP address. It could be labeled anything, and the macro will utilize your name and revert the data back to your field name on output. So just as an example of that, I'm going to change IP address to Skylar, and in the macro itself I'm going to configure the IP address to be mapped to the field Skylar. In the request itself, I have the ability to sort or to not sort the data, and I would like to sort that data, so I'm going to hit run. And from the input data, I have V for an anchor, and I have 5 records, and I have N for an anchor, and I have 2 records. We'll come back to the valid records, and I'm telling you if the IP validated as being in a known range for IP addresses. There are some rules that I looked up on Wikipedia for those addresses. And then the address ranges themselves, 10, 172, and forgive me, I've forgotten the other range, are private IP address ranges versus public, so you'll get an IP type on output as well. If the IP address is out of range, this one has 256 for an IP address and it can't be any more than 255, then the IP validation will be false and the IP type will be blank. So how did we do this? I'm going to open up the macro and take a look. The macro itself has interface control, which we'll get to in a moment, along with the IP validation workflow. The input here, I can edit that data, and here when I started building the macro, I only had 2 IP addresses that I was working with. And I named it input and gave it an anchor of I. That way, this letter I, which you can see a little bit clearer here for the input, says input. We'll see V becomes sorted valid data and non-valid. So we have the input data coming in, and I have a field map. I don't know if the IP address is going to be IP, it could be address, it could be IP underscore address, but we're going to take whatever field that they give it to us and have them map it with this field map. The next step is to apply the validation rules. And in this, I actually thought about different ways to achieve the validation rules and decided to be complicated about it. Complicated in what I hope to be a simple manner. We used a regular expression. And I'm going to break down the regular expression for you. I've got a Word document that will help to explain that regular expression. The regular expression starts out with a beginning of text, which is the caret sign, and then has a grouping. So that first grouping is what's in yellow. And it's going to check for that yellow grouping of rules 3 times. And then it's going to execute that grouping again for a 4th time, followed by the end of field character. That grouping is looking for anything that could be just the numbers 0 through 9, or it could be the numbers 1 through 99, or it could be 100 through 199, or 200 to 249, or 250 to 255. I could have solved this without a regular expression by parsing the data and basically looking for any valid number between 0 and 255. That's what we're doing here. And what it's going to do is it's going to look for that number 0 through 255 followed 3 times, that rule 3 times for 3 parts of the IP address, followed by that number again that doesn't have a decimal point at the end. The way that this is broken down to is by use of an OR. So we see these pipes in here. This first statement is looking for 0 through 9, or 1 through 9, followed by any digit of 0 through 9. So that'll give you the values of 1 through 99. Or 1 followed by any 2 digits. That would allow 100 to 192 to come by, or the number 2 followed by the numbers 0 through 4 followed by any digit. That's the way I get to 200 to 249. And the last one is 25 followed by any of the numbers 0 through 5. Back to Alteryx. That regular expression, I've set that data type to a Boolean. It will come out true or false. The next is the IP type. And here I have an if-then-else statement. If the IP validation is true and the left 3 most characters in the IP address are 10 dot or 172 or 192, then these are private ranges. Else, if the IP validation is true, then it becomes public. Else, I've just got 2 ticks here, it becomes empty. That's really the heart of the validation. I then come into a filter that will look to see if the validation is true, go along this upper path towards the V output. If it's false, then come to the N output where I've said these are non-valid IP addresses and I gave the anchor of N. When they're true, they're going to go into a detour, and you'll see that I have connections above this detour. So if somebody were to sort an IP address on output, I've got a radio button here that describes that, followed by an action. And that's going to update the detour direction from the question above. So if somebody should say, I want to sort that, it's going to cause this to detour to the right. And we're going to follow this path down here. But if they selected the radio button no sort on output, absolutely nothing happens. So this detour continues along the left path and goes to the V output. If we have decided that we're going to sort the data, I'm going to look at that IP address field with a dot delimiter, and I'm going to split it into 4 columns. If there's more than 4 columns of data, I am going to error on this macro. I'm then going to sort the data, and I'm going to use a dictionary sort. So that will keep everything sorted in sequence numerically. If you don't have the dictionary sort order, you would see things like the number 1 followed by the number 100 followed by the number 2. That wouldn't be good. And then I'm going to use a select to eliminate those parsed fields that I used just for the purpose of sorting and return back to the detour end. And finally, I've got another select here where I've updated the select with reverse field map. That is a trick. That is something that you need to know. If the input data in our example was called Skylar, here where I renamed that field to Skylar, on output I want to be able to see Skylar as the output name. If the data isn't renamed, what would happen is Skylar would now become IP address. So that little trick here, which is taking an action tool, connecting it on outbound to the select, and then taking the input and taking that question up to the action, that will allow me to see what fields were mapped, and I will be able to reverse that field map. Now I'm going to take the output, the V output, and take a look at that. I've included the word sorted. Maybe they are sorted, maybe they aren't. And these are the valid IP addresses. In your view, you can see an interface designer, and I have moved these questions that are here around. I've added some text to be able to explain what the macro does. And I've also, with the wrench, I used a custom icon that I found on Google Images to be able to be used to be what's being presented for the tool itself. So that IP was created because I used the wrench and selected a custom icon. A few other tidbits for cleanup here. Metadata information. I included my name as the author, my company name, and the copyright. That information, when it's brought into the gallery, is then honored, and that information is presented for that gallery presentation. If you would like to use this macro in your business, that's okay with me. I put this out there for public consumption. So this macro itself has a picture of my logo. That's a background image. I had selected a background image here, and I'd selected my logo, and then I resized it to be able to be present here. I also did a few little artistic updates, and that's that I selected colors for these containers. I think that about covers it. If you've got questions, you can email me at mark@marqueecrew. I'd love to have your feedback. Thanks.